just reading some words from the list of words that are being scrubbed from federal government websites. Just a couple of these. Feminism. They, them. Minority. Oppression. Political. That's an odd one to scrub from political websites. Gulf of Mexico. So anyways, I'm just going to read from these words occasionally when we gather, just to make sure that we keep this language alive as it's being systematically scrubbed from our government sites. Historically. So we should definitely keep using that word. Also, as long as we're in reminders mode, please take this moment to silence your cell phones. But when you turn your cell phones back on, please download 5Calls, the 5Calls app, and make some calls to your representatives. This handy app will put you in direct touch with your local, state, and federal representatives, and will give you a chance to share your 2 cents about any issues on your mind, whether it's ceasefires, or the pothole in your neighborhood, or not arresting and deporting student activists. So download 5Calls when you turn your phone back on. Lastly, if you do have to leave the room, please be careful with that door in the back as you exit, because it weighs approximately 1 million pounds. So with that, I'm delighted on this wonderful spring day to welcome to the Visiting Writer Series Rita Bullwinkel. At a time when we are surrounded by superficiality and deception and literal crimes against humanity, it is genuinely life-saving to encounter a writer as profoundly honest and humane as Rita. Her 2022 short story collection, Belly Up, won the Believer Book Award and garnered the Whiting Foundation Award. And in their citation, the Whiting Foundation described the book as witty, bewildering, tart, daring. Bullwinkle sounds simply like herself and nobody else. And that's what so many of us are trying to do in our creative writing classes, is how to learn to sound like ourselves and like nobody else. Between Rita's many other artistic endeavors, which I hope we'll talk about today, Bullwinkle followed up with her debut novel, 2024's Headshot, a stunning, prismatic, radical novel that follows the lives of 8 teenage girl boxers over the 2-day Daughters of America Championship tournament held at Bob's Boxing Palace in Reno, Nevada. Quote, "These girl fighters are the opposite of humans in decay," Bullwinkle writes. "They are accelerating away from death with speed and precision. Immortality wafts off them." Artemis Victor, Andy Taylor, Kate Heffer, we didn't plan that, Rachel Dorico, Iggy Lang, Izzy Lang, Rose Weller, Tanya Ma. You step into the ring with them, you sweat with them, you dream with them. You suffer nightmares, you meet ghosts, you bleed with them, all under the lights, all within the dizzying confines of the boxing ring. It's a difficult book to describe. I was thinking Virginia Woolf meets Martin Scorsese. To the Lighthouse meets Raging Bull. The sort of searching intellect and tenderness and temporal elegance of Virginia Woolf meets the searing imagery and obsession and violence and kinetic energy and composition of Scorsese. The Booker Prize judges, who named Headshot among their long-listed books, had this to say: "Funny, propulsive, obsessive, and ecstatic, Headshot is equal parts subtle and intense, as it brings us to the sidelines of the boxing ring and above and beyond it." The notoriously cantankerous critic Dwight Garner heralded Bullwinkle as a meaningful new American voice, writing, "This book is so enveloping to read that you feel, at times, that you are writing it in your own mind. It contains no bogus psychologizing." So, usually we write these introductions weeks in advance. We are catching Rita at a moment in which the accolades are coming faster than you can literally write an introduction, because things are happening so wonderfully for this book. So bear with me, because a couple things are new in this list. But Rita is the author of Headshot, which I mentioned was longlisted for the 2024 Booker Prize, a finalist for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize, named a Best Book of 2024 by the New York Times Book Review, NPR, Time, Vulture, LitHub, The Guardian, and former President Barack Obama. As I mentioned, her debut collection, Belly Up, garnered a 2022 Writing Award. Her writing has been published in Zizba, Tin House, The White Review, Conjunctions, Bomb, Vice, Noon, Guernica. She's been the recipient of grants and fellowships from McDowell, Brown University, Vanderbilt University, Hawthorne and Castle, and the Helene Wurlitzer Foundation. Her work has been translated all over the world. Both her fiction and translation have been nominated for Pushcart Prizes. I believe in the past 14 days, there's also been an accolade from the Academy of American Letters, and also perhaps you've heard of the California Book Club, which is reading Headshot this month. So it's been a busy month, so thank you for being with us. Rita has 2 events today, so thank you for being with us. It means a lot. She's doing it for the love of the game, folks. So Rita lives in San Francisco, where, among all of these other things, she is the editor of McSweeney's, the quarterly journal founded in 1998 by Dave Eggers and one of the most fantastic magazines on our blue planet. So please welcome Rita, who will be reading from a book today that people will be reading for many years to come. Rita Bullwinkel.
Thank you. Thanks. It is such a joy and honor to be here with you all tonight. This afternoon, I mean. Chris, thank you so much for that really moving introduction. Just, puffed me up. Okay, I'm going to read to you right from the beginning of this book, this novel, Headshot. Headshot is structured as a tournament bracket. And so each section that looks like a chapter is actually a fight between 2 of the 8 main characters. And I'm going to read to you just from the first fight of the novel, Artemis Victor versus Andy Taylor. Andy Taylor is pumping her hands together, hitting her own flat stomach, thinking not of her mother sitting at home with her little brother, not of her car which barely got her here, not of her summer job, her lifeguarding at the overcrowded community pool, not of the 4-year-old she watched die, the 4-year-old she practically killed, and his blue cheeks. They shouldn't give teenagers the job of saving children. It doesn't matter how many CPR classes you've taken. She killed the boy with her wandering eyes. His swimsuit had small red trucks on it. He looked like he was made out of plastic. The feel of his thigh when she pulled him from the bottom of the pool, already dead. And the way it was so easy to grip because it was so small. She's not thinking about it. She's looking at the skylight and the light it's letting in on this shithole gym, and she's thinking about the things she always does wrong when she fights. Her lazy left guard, the way her left hand slips away and doesn't protect her face when she's not thinking about it. She's also thinking about the way Artemis Victor will get her. If Andy Taylor doesn't think about this, this fight will be over in a matter of seconds. Andy Taylor needs to think about her spacing and her stomach. Andy Taylor needs to think about her stance. They're still sitting and looking at each other meanly. They know each other but have never fought before. When you join the Women's Youth Boxing League, the facade of a sports association makes you pay $200, and then you get a free subscription to their magazine, which profiles its members, young girl boxers, one by one. So you see who's out there, even if they are across the country, and you get a good sense of who you're up against, and you know who they've fought, and who they're going to fight, and what their favorite hobby is, because God only knows what kind of a journalist writes this excuse for a magazine, but whoever it is seems to think it is valuable profile information and that it should be included in every athlete profile, because in every issue there it is: name, hometown, favorite color, hobby, wins and losses, photo of the girl in gloves. The photo is a wild card because some girls choose to take it in their gym clothes while others choose to take it in halter tops, their hair down, their heads tilted, and their gloves resting on their hips. Andy Taylor would know Artemis Victor anywhere because Artemis Victor is the youngest of the 3 Victor sisters, a family of boxers whose parents come to every single one of Artemis's matches with shirts that say Victor, which is, of course, ridiculous, their proclamation of their daughters winning records on their chests. Everyone knows the Victor sisters and what they've won and what they've lost, and the judges treat Artemis's family like old friends, which in boxing is especially infuriating because the gray area of a call is often so present, and if you know a judge has a special relationship with the participants, you can't help thinking, I'm being slighted, this is the end of me. If only I had parents willing to befriend my coaches, if only I had parents who could get off work, who didn't work, who could come see me win. Mr. and Mrs. Victor sit in folding chairs next to the ring. There are barely over 24 other onlookers, judges, other girl fighters, a journalist from the local paper, a journalist from the Women's Youth Boxing Association magazine, parents, a grandmother, coaches, and Bob, the owner of this gym. Bob is also a coach, but as a rule doesn't coach women. He has no particular fighter he'd like to see win. His gym was just the right location for the tournament to take place in. All the coaches are men, and all the coaches own gyms, and all the coaches collect fees from the girls to, in part, pay the Women's Youth Boxing Association, who, in turn, pays the coaches for hosting regionals at their gyms. Some of the coaches were amateur boxers, but many of them have never competed at the level that these girls are fighting in. The girls' coaches travel to the tournament to get their checks from the association. In between rounds, Artemis and Andy's coaches do speak to them, but the coaches speak only in cliches and useless information. Everything the coaches have taught the girls is in the past. The language of the coaches inside Bob's boxing palace is like the sound of the loud overhead fan. Artemis and Andy wish they could fight with less sound pollution. Every sound other than the smack of a hit is only a distraction. Artemis Victor is rolling her shoulders. She's looking at Andy Taylor and thinking, you are ugly. I am prettier than you, and I'm going to beat you too. Artemis sizes at other women physically everywhere. I'm the prettiest woman in this room, she thinks. There's one woman over there who may be prettier if you like girls who look like drug addicts. There are men who like girls who look like drug addicts. When Artemis Victor thinks of herself in the future, she thinks of herself as wildly successful in a big house, maybe in Miami, not a drug addict. Artemis Victor has a teddy bear that has a doll shirt that says Victor. That's my girl, yells Mrs. Victor. Artemis Victor always thinks she's going to win. It's not a bad habit to get in if one is capable of throwing self-doubt out the window. This power can be a beneficial weapon to deploy. Artemis Victor hates her oldest sister. Her oldest sister won the Daughters of America Cup 4 years ago. Her middle sister got a silver. Even if Artemis wins the whole thing, wins the whole tournament, and becomes the best in the country, the best woman under 18 in the United States at boxing, she'll still be second best to her oldest sister, Star Victor, because Star became the best in the country before her, and is now married with a husband and a child, and well on her way to owning a house, if not being rich. Artemis Victor has no idea what it takes to own a house, but she knows what it takes to beat other people, which is what owning property seems like. Beating other people at owning a piece of the earth, and that making that piece of earth yours, not to be shared with other people. Because the owning of the property is a product of your victory over other humans, as in, you won more dollars than them, so now this slice of land is yours for keeps. It's not that Artemis is stupid. She'd make an excellent banker, though she'll become a wine distributor. It's just that her values are very narrow. She has an insanely good eye for reading people, for knowing what they are thinking under the words they are speaking, for watching how people hold themselves when they talk to you, whether or not they are interested in you. She knows which of her high school teachers to feel bad for, the ones whose eyes dart around looking for someone to listen to them. She knows the right way to say a thing, to make people think she is interested in hearing them speak. Artemis Victor is also a vegan. She genuinely feels bad for animals. This was part of her profile in the Women's Youth Boxing Association magazine, the WYBA. Artemis Victor loves animals. She watched a documentary on the abuse of whales in theme parks and also thinks they should be let free. The referee is in the middle of the ring and is saying things to the girls about rules that they already know and have heard 100 times before. They nod their heads and get up off their stools and begin to bounce up and down. Andy is bouncing much more than Artemis. Artemis paces forward, steady. They're both wearing silk shorts and sports bras and tank tops. The elastic on their waistbands make dents in their skin that will last for hours after they take their shorts off. A week ago, Andy came home and took off her shorts and looked at the red ring of gullies the shorts had left on her stomach. She fingered the indentations with her hands. When the marks disappeared an hour later, she was sad not to have them. They seemed like evidence of the work she'd done. She wished she had a black eye from a winning fight to wear around, to show people she was fighting, to show people her body was doing something that was hard. Andy's knee is out too far, and Artemis moves in to force Andy to retract it back under her hips. These are the size-up seconds, the moment a fighter has to see if and where their opponent has weaknesses. If Artemis has a weakness, it is in the fact that she is a legacy. Her sister's wins hang over her. She is reminded of them constantly. This is the tournament where she can be as good as her eldest sister or the worst boxer in her family. The type of legacy that is the Victor family is rarer in boxing than other kinds of sports, but not unheard of. Youth women's boxing is a world small enough that the Victors could conquer it. Andy Taylor's knee is still not in the right place. Artemis lifts her lip to her nose to show her red mouth guard covered teeth. Artemis's biceps are balls of muscle. She can hit things harder than most people can throw a ball. Her back muscles are arched in two small hills on either side of her neck. Artemis begins to see a weakness in the way Andy moves, where Artemis thinks she can place the hit. Artemis Victor thinks she can touch Andy Taylor. Just as Artemis thinks this, Andy hits the left side of Artemis's ribs. It's a hard blow that the judges call a hit immediately. The score is yelled loud enough so everyone can hear it. This is a point-hitting game after all. That's why they wear padded headgear that circles their ears and cheeks and foreheads and buckles under their chins. This is target practice. Andy had seen a tunnel of vacancy between her right fist and Artemis's left rib cage. It had looked illuminated, like it was just begging to be filled with Andy's fist. Andy had put her hand in the hole to Artemis's body, that tunnel of vacancy, and then was filling the hole again and again until the referee got between them. The referee had checked the inside of Andy's gloves before he taped them onto her wrists. He was checking to see if she put lead in them. They always do this before a match. It's part of the rules of the association. Andy loves when the referees reach into her gloves. She likes watching their hands go into a hole where her hands are about to go. The fact that they check every time makes Andy feel like she's capable of murder. She loves having an adult confirm that her fist could be a weapon. Maybe she could put a rock in there. Maybe she is capable of killing the girl she is fighting. Every time the referees look in her gloves, it is like they are saying, "You are capable of killing," which feels good to Andy. Most people in her life don't seem to believe she's capable of anything, let alone killing someone with purpose. And with the wandering eyes murder of the little boy, she wonders if she's also capable of killing someone with her fists. The boy with the red truck shorts. Andy wasn't thinking about him, was not even the worst thing that had happened to Andy or the first dead body she had seen, but it was the smallest. The other dead body had been her father's. The smallness of the dead boy had seemed especially disgusting. The day had been so clear and dry. She hadn't cried. She vomited after it was clear that the red truck kid was not going to come back to life. The vomiting made Andy feel like she herself was a small child. She was surprised by her body's visceral repulsion to the dead red truck kid. It was the image of his small, corn dog-sized thigh that made her vomit. Andy hit Artemis again, this time on Artemis's shoulder. How long could she get away with hitting Artemis Victor? I'll stop there. So I come over here.
This is where we'll transition from the reading to the hard-hitting literary interview.
Okay.
So,
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Wow. It's like we're really on television.
so according to the literary tabloids,
Oh my God.
you once proposed an AWP panel that proposed using a T-shirt can.
That is correct.
Is this true?
This is true.
Can you? Many folks in this room are about to head to AWP next week, and so can you tell us why you proposed that panel, what you were thinking, and whether or not it was accepted?
Yeah, I felt like anecdotally I had like a cohort of writer friends who I really loved and admired, who had these neglected pasts as like very successful athletes. The short story writer Kelsey Norris was a Division I gymnast. Patrick Cottrell is an avid basketball player and fan. And so the three of us were like, well, we should do an AWP panel on sports. I think this was a long time ago. I think it was maybe 2015. And yeah, I thought it would be really fun. I looked into renting a t-shirt gun.
Those are available for rent?
Yes, they're expensive to buy, but cheap to rent. And yeah, I thought it would be, I mean, the proposal had some sense to it, I think, reference like famously Haruki Murakami is like an obsessive runner who's written a lot about running. There have certainly, I think, been many writers that I admire who have written in and around sport. Some that really come to mind is like the way Natalie Diaz writes about basketball. It's really moving to me. And David Foster Wallace is a figure that I have a complicated relationship with, but I think his writing about tennis and infinite jest is some of my favorite writing about sport. So anyway, so this panel I feel like did have a context. It wasn't just going to be like, me, Patrick, and Kelsey shooting a t-shirt gun at AWP. But the panel was rejected, and
you probably regret that choice now.
I would like to think so.
The reason I was so curious about that panel, in addition to the t-shirt canning component, was because as I was reading Headshot, there were so many times in which you were describing the intensity of the girls in the ring that echoed to me strongly the intensity of the artistic process and the creative process. So can you just talk a little bit about Obsession as it relates to the characters in Headshot and Obsession as it relates to your artistic process?
Oh, Chris, I'm so glad that you had that reading. Yeah, I do feel like, so I was not a boxer, I've never been a boxer, but I was a fairly successful competitive youth athlete. I co-captained the top 20 ranked Division I water polo team and competed at like a national youth, like 14 and under level in both basketball and water polo. And so I had all these memories of what my like whole youth was pretty much, and early adulthood was structured around, of driving to kind of like far out parts of the country to go meet another me, someone else doing this thing, but they spent all of their time doing that very, very few people were watching. And my experience of like being a young youth athlete and also of being a writer is similar, and that I think that there's basically like nothing that could happen that would either monetarily or emotionally equal the amount of my life I have spent doing it. It's like the practice of it is beyond any type of publication or reward. For me, making art and writing things that I feel like have some semblance of meaning to me, they have like a, why do I do these things? I think it's because they're like the only things that make me feel like the earth hours I've spent doing it has been worthwhile. I very much love publishing. I work for a small publisher. I think having conversations with generous, fellow writers and readers is really meaningful to me. But I think like the making of something, the practice of writing is really beyond even publication for me. And that felt true for my experience as a youth athlete as well. It's so funny, one of the things about this book is that I've encountered some resistance with when I've met people is they've been like, well, surely if you're the best, you're the 5th or 6th best youth boxer in the country, like there would be more people watching and there would be more people there. But I only get that response from people who have never actually been a competitive athlete. Because, for instance, one of the people who very generously blurbed this book is Ginny Fuchs, who's one of the best boxers in the world. She was represented the U.S. in the Olympics this summer, and she has, like many other Olympic athletes, she has 4 or 5 other jobs to support her endeavor as an Olympic athlete, even though she's literally one of the best living athletes in the world. And a lot of people do sometimes come and see her box, but I think that there's also this element of the girls in this book, I think something they're always circling around is why are we doing this? Who are we doing this for? And I'd like to think the book, and similarly with writing, it's who are we writing for?
So are readers anticipating that there would be stadiums full of people watching this championship match or something?
I think some people were deeply surprised.
Interesting, because that struck me as not only one of the most authentic parts of the storytelling, but also just one of the most moving. I'm thinking here at the end of night 1, as we're at what should be the peak match of night 1, and by that time there's 9 people watching the fight, and 4 of them are judges. And that not only just the profound isolation of the fighters in this locked in this combat, but also this sense of that they're doing it for something beyond the audience, and that resonated to me in the artistic process in a way as well. That makes me wonder. So you are drawing from some of your own experiences as a youth athlete, but how proximate did you get to this world of youth teenage girl boxing in order to write Headshot, or was it sort of an amalgamation of other sporting worlds that you've been a part of?
It was definitely mostly the latter, an amalgamation of other sporting worlds, coupled with my own interest in the sport of boxing. The reason why I wanted to set the book in the world of boxing specifically is because there's so much about boxing that is theatrical, and from everything from the lighting of the ring to the way that the sport itself is structured, almost in the rounds so heavily resemble almost acts of a play. And there's so much about boxing that is archetypal to, in a really large way, to the American identity. I mean, maybe Ireland has a relationship to boxing that's kind of similar to the US, and there are a few other places that have a really strong relationship to the sport. But I think the most important reason why I wanted to set the book in the world of boxing is because I think that the way that 2 bodies look when they're boxing against each other looks like the way, it looks like bodies having dialogue. It looks, to me, it looks like speaking in a way that was really interesting to me. And there's maybe only a few other sports like that. I would venture another sport that has been written about a lot is tennis. Also looks a lot like dialogue. It looks like people speaking, or it's like a conversation happening. So it was really kind of the physical constraints of the sport that drew me to it. And then when I started to watch more boxing, I wasn't watching championship pay-per-view boxing or anything like that. This book is very much not set in that world. The media that really made me feel like I had access to the world was I happened upon this trove of really long, 6-8 hour unedited YouTube training videos made by young girls who had set up a tripod, who were just videotaping themselves doing footwork and hits for long periods of time. And the intention of these training videos is that YouTube was just an archival space where they could go back and rewatch them. And the idea is that if you watch video of yourself doing something for long enough, you'll be able to see the difference between what you think you're doing and form-wise and what you're actually doing in your mind, and you can close that gap and make your form more and more and more exact. And this was a training technique that I had used for my entire childhood growing up. When I did it, it was before the era of like phone videos, so it was at that time when, if anyone is old enough to remember, when like video memory was very expensive. So remember we had those like little chips, and you would use them up. And so I would always, I would film over video once it had been made, but I had all these memories of being a competitive youth athlete and watching like hundreds and hundreds of hours of video of myself to try and see if I could change my form. And so it was from these youth women's boxing videos, these long, unedited, archival training videos that I learned everything about boxing.
And and even as you describe that, that's not unlike the process of revision, of returning to one's work again and again and making these small adjustments. I want to talk about what you mentioned with boxing being sort of intrinsically theatrical and sort of your choices around structure and time. But before I get there, I do want to go back briefly to the literary tabloids. Word on the street is that this novel actually began from a different point of view and with only one boxer at the center. So can you talk about where Headshot began and how you arrived at its current structure and how that happened?
I had something that I'm always reticent to call it a first draft of this book, but it was a manuscript that was hundreds of pages, that was from the first person pastime's point of view of a single young female boxer. And I had written it, and I put it aside, and over a residency I decided I wanted to come back to it to see if I could finish it, or to see if it was finished. And I read the whole book in a day and decided, or whatever this was, the first draft, or whatever this thing was, and decided that the only parts of the manuscript that had any energy or resonance for me was when this single protagonist was inside the ring fighting another character, and that the confines of the ring allowed for emotional insight and for a travel in time. It was the only interesting thing about that manuscript. And so 20 minutes after rereading this manuscript, I wrote the tournament bracket, I named all 8 of the characters in the book, and I just began from the first tournament and wrote the book linearly from there. And it took me a long time to write the book linearly, but I never deviated from that initial realization of the tournament structure and of the character names. So yeah, I don't know how you are.
Was that a eureka moment when did you know as soon as you made that decision, this is it, this is the new way for this project?
I tend to, I don't know how you are, Chris, I'm really, I definitely get a high by throwing stuff away. So I definitely am whoa, let's just, to see all those Earth hours kind of go out the window, it's kind of intoxicating.
Yeah, it's liberating.
It's like that thing, nothing to me. It's like I call it, in other parts of my life, I call it jumping ship syndrome. When you're I should jump off the ship. Let's just do it and see what happens. And so I do that a lot with writing. I rarely go heavily back into a draft. I usually am just it's way easier to just start over or completely change something and do something dramatic. So I don't recommend that. I'm not you should do that, but it is something that I have been guilty of in multiple facets with writing.
So you jumped to a different ship in this case. And
right, exactly.
And then the tournament unfolded. Sort of at that point, did you know who was going to win at the beginning, or did you discover who was going to win along the way? Sorry, we don't want to spoil anything, but just structurally speaking, process-wise.
Yeah, no, I did not know who was going. I knew the characters. I didn't know who was going to win, and I was definitely discovering who was going to win along with the reader as I was writing it. In hindsight, I don't know if you feel this with your books, but in hindsight, you know, you write this book and then you talk about it and you're like, oh, is this what I was doing? I think what I was doing is that I think if I felt that I didn't know a girl well enough, then I would stick with her. Like I would feel like I have to spend more time with you. But yeah, I definitely didn't know who was going to win the whole tournament from the outset.
I love that this notion of you getting to know the girls better, because I also don't want to overemphasize the notion of who wins as being all that important to the book, frankly, because it's really about the battles and the journeys along the way. Because you allude to this movement through time. One of the things that's so amazing is structurally is that each section is literally like a round by round account, and yet within these sort of timed rounds, there's so much movement through time. So we get to know every fighter from early childhood episodes through later in life. And I'm wondering, how important is it for you generally as a fiction writer to have that like longitudinal understanding of the characters, to be able to write about them?
Oh, that's such a good question. I don't think it's always important for every project. For this one it was. Like, you learn how most of the 8 characters, like the context in which they were born, and you learn how all of them will die. I wanted, the space of the boxing match to have that outside of timeness, where you, the reader, felt like you were living on a different continuum. But I've definitely, like with my stories, I've definitely written stories where if someone were to say, how did this character die? I would say, I have no idea. That's like the story's not, it's not a question the story is asking. Is it important for you?
I would say the same, that it's sort of like dependent on the story and the project. It just, for me, what struck me about Headshot was just how vividly you seemed as the omniscient voice here to understand the sort of currents throughout their entire lives and the nuance with which those moments were brought to bear in the middle of the fight. Which for me leads to another question sort of structurally, and I wonder if I'm like reading too much into your structure, but for those of you who haven't read the book, I just want to like sort of hold up, like literally this is a random page, so that you can see like how the prose is structured. These sort of short bursts of prose that felt to me like being in a ring in terms of like jabs, or some felt like jabs, some felt like uppercuts, some at moments it felt like the storytelling was bobbing and weaving. I mean, how did you do that? Like how did you arrive at this structure in terms of the length of each section and the effect that you're trying to create with that?
That is such a good question. It was there from the beginning. I think of the space breaks as spaces of travel, like not necessarily geographically or in time, but of like intense movement. I really early on with the book, when I finished the first 2 sections, I did a reading with a friend. It was just the 2 of us, where I would read and I asked her to hold up a white paper every time there was a space break like that. And it was a really nice visual representation of like how I was thinking about those section breaks. And one that I wish I could recreate maybe in other readings in the future.
Interesting. I want to ask about your artistic life beyond the book, but I do have and I want to hear from questions from the audience as well. But, one thing that I think strikes me about Headshot, and as well as your short stories, is you have this affinity or this, for world building. And in this case, you're building not only the world of Bob's Boxing Palace, but also there's this really vivid scene where you're describing the worlds that these boxers have built for themselves is almost like a stack of CDs. And we learn about the worlds that the girls have built for themselves in order to fight. And so how do you think about world building at the book level, but also the individual world that a character makes for herself?
Yeah, I think it's something that is one of the most thrilling and true things to me about fiction. I think that as people, like we are all always building the parameters and constraints and realities of our life, and that fiction's ability to mirror that or reproduce it in part or in whole is like one of its most powerful elements. And so therefore, it's like, it's one of the most powerful, biggest knives that fiction has, so it interests me to try and attempt to use it. It's interesting that this book, it is in a relatively realist world, but I do think about the world of Bob's Boxing Palace that the book is set in as, like, the act of building it as being not dissimilar from the act of building a world where there's dragons. It's so specific and outsized of what I would say the normal wheel of cultural reality that I really wanted it to feel really departed from that. In the book has some surreal elements. My editor called it not quite realism, which I really appreciated. Like, some of the characters, their names are a little caricature. They're not quite real names. And the other thing too is the world of the youth athletic tournament. I don't know, I'm sure many of you have spent lots of time in athletic facilities, but they're places architecturally that very much resemble convention centers or malls. You can almost immediately, as soon as you enter them, imagine them as decayed and abandoned spaces. They often share similar literally the same hardware and lighting, so that you could be anywhere on the planet once you enter them. So they have this spaceship quality to them. So yeah, this book, and I am in general very interested in world building, and it's something as a reader that I really relish.
Thank you for that. One more question before we turn over to the audience is, you lead, in some ways, a very public literary life, in many ways, right? So you're editing a magazine, you're out and about, I believe tonight you were talking about translation and Clarice Lispector, doing reading here and so forth. So in ways, as an editor, as a professor, as an author, you're very public and out there. But as you mentioned, that creative process is very secluded and individual. How do you balance those two parts of your life, the sort of public literary part of your life and sort of the private creative part of your life?
Oh, that's such a good question. I don't know if I do a very good job. I think the short answer, or maybe it's not so short, I think that one answer is that I'm just totally obsessed with books, and I love the greatest, something I do for fun that is just an intense privilege to me is talking with people who also love books about books, and it, to me, is one of the most fun things that can be done. So it's really kind of just a chasing of pleasure in that way. It is interesting that the act of reading is so unlike other art experiences. I think reading is a deeply collaborative project with the reader, in a way that, as a viewer of a film, for instance, you bring yourself to the film, but film and painting are very voyeuristic. You're looking upon something. Whereas a book requires that the reader bring their own lived experience of pain and joy and heartbreak and loss in order to make vivid the world. And so it's such a unique art experience, a singular art experience in that way. And talking with other people about what world they built with the book. This was my reading of it. Inevitably, with close friends and people who are really close readers, always we have a slightly different house that we built with the same book. And that's really, really, really interesting to me. I'm so confused. People are always the novel, the book, it's dead. Consistently for 200 years they've been saying it, but it's actually just a really good piece of technology. It's an extremely effective, hands down our most effective way to enter another consciousness and to experience the interiority of someone outside your own mind. For me, personally, it is like hands down the medium that moves me most. You know, I feel like a lot of people have really visceral reactions to music, which I like music, but I do feel like I'm most changed, I'm like most moved by prose.
So, okay, one more question about speaking of meaningful and singular art experiences. Can you tell us about the latest issue of McSweeney's?
Oh, yeah, oh God, I just came from the office, I should have brought copies, shame on me, what was I thinking?
We'll fill up our offices with some.
Okay, yeah, as some of you may know, McSweeney's Quarterly is a magazine of primarily literary fiction. Every once in a while we do include a stray poem or prose piece, but it really is primarily fiction. And it was founded in 1998 by Dave Eggers, and I have been working part-time for McSweeney's on like a project-by-project basis since 2016, editing like one-off book projects or being a second reader for the Quarterly, but actually just 6 months ago, so relatively recently, I came on as the full-time editor of the Quarterly. And the first issue that was fully under my editorial direction just came out in February, so within the month, and I am so excited about what's in it. There are 17 writers, all with like new, fresh, incredible prose. Everything is star-studded, but there's this incredible story by Miko Kawakami that's told entirely through a narrative point of view of a woman walking through the streets of Tokyo listening to phone calls that she is overhearing, eavesdropping on. In my humble opinion, Kawakami is Japan's greatest living novelist. And also this like incredible new sci-fi epic, and the Kawakami is translated by David Boyd, who's a really fabulous and famous Japanese translator. There's this incredible piece, this sci-fi epic by Yuri Herrera, translated by Lisa Dillman, which is really bizarre and surreal and amazing. There's like a machine that works with fire, it's totally fantastic. There's this really salty letter from Nell Sink, which is really great. There's also 3 stories that came in through our paper slush aisle, which I am the sole reader of, which is like turning into like a deeply physical problem for me. I'm like many months. We're gonna come up with a better reading process, but the story that begins the issue is this story called The Horts by a writer named Emily Crossan, who was totally unfamiliar to me, that I encountered in the first time in the slush with this story. And Emily, I learned later, has published like a few stories, but doesn't have a book. And yeah, the story is absolutely amazing. It starts out with these 2 women at lunch, and one of them is kind of just talking about all of the failures in her life, and in this really kind of vain way, and taking up a lot of space. And the friend is like, maybe, specifically in regards to writing, and this friend is like, maybe you should try writing autofiction, like that sells, everybody loves autofiction. And the protagonist is like, I should try writing autofiction. And then you travel with this protagonist into their telling of their autofictional world, and in this like sharp, a turn that is both like simultaneously sharp and slow, you begin to realize that autofiction for this narrator is the fact that they are a rodent, like you are being narrated to by a rat. And then the piece devolves, like the narrator is explaining the reality of rat grammar, and the piece devolves into this like rat grammar piece. It's unreal. It's totally fantastic and funny and stark and emotional, and it just like, I read it all in one go and emailed her like as soon as I could. So the issue has like stars in it. It also, really, I would like to say, some of our most exciting, well-known literary voices. And it also has people for whom this is maybe their second or third publication, which is something that the magazine really values, and I'm really excited to be, that is a huge value to me, and I love encountering work that way. Also, can I share some this is like this video is saved for your program.
Yes, yes.
It's not like being live broadcast.
No, we are not live around the world right now.
Okay, just a second. I have some really exciting news to share about the quarterly. It's like
please do,
I think it's fine if I share it in this group.
This sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's like, I'm really excited about it. Which is that the New York Times has, maybe some of you, has this newish amazing thing called the New York Times audio app. Maybe some of you have used it, perhaps listened to some things, some audio pieces like The Daily on it. And they, for a long time, have been wanting to partner with other publications to produce radio pieces from other publications to build out like a New York Times, essentially like radio station. And they were looking, there are going to be pieces, some of that have already been released on the app are from like Vanity Fair and from like feature pieces from Vogue, but New York Times has never in audio or otherwise published works of fiction, and they were like, for our radio, we really want to include fiction pieces. And they approached us, and starting this Friday, they're going to be publishing audio versions of stories from McSweeney's on the New York Times platform.
Yeah, dude, that is amazing.
And they're paying McSweeney's and our authors for it. Which is
that is
so
amazing.
I know.
That is
so
amazing.
Great.
And a huge round of applause.
Sorry.
Thank you for sharing that with us here. And also, at this time, when everything, including the New York Times and art and fiction is just like, feels like this onslaught, for that sort of act of faith on the part of the Times to do that, it must be just so painful.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it because we're really intentional about we're a print-only magazine. We don't have like an online, you can't read our stories online. And I think having a selection of the stories available in like beautifully produced audio pieces is a really, really nice accessibility stopgap, in terms of like, obviously the readership of like the Times audio app is, we actually have a great subscription base. The quarterly reaches 6,000 people, which is pretty...
Yeah, that's a big number for a literary magazine, of course.
Yeah, but anyway, thank you for letting me...
And when you say this Friday, you mean this Friday the production begins, or this Friday we can ourselves tune in?
You can tune in this Friday. It's going to be announced.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. So sorry. This is like today. The Times sent over what the page will look like the audio for it. So it's all done.
Wow.
That's why I feel like I can show you.
How involved are you in the radio production side of things? Do they just say like listen to this?
The Times people are so intense. I'm not very involved. I'm involved in what gets produced, but they have like a whole like repertoire of voice actors that they work with, many of whom would be familiar to you, and so they've been doing their thing for like a long time. They're really good at it.
So they're like, you read the slush pile and bring us the stories, and we will radio produce them.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Congratulations. So you heard it here first, folks. This Friday, New York Times.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, with that, let's hear some questions from the audience, either about Headshot or about McSweeney's or anything. Come on with the mic.
Actually, I think you can hear me from up there, right? Or should I?
Yeah, just for the sake of accessibility and also the video.
Okay, gotcha. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks for coming by. So with Headshot, it's such a fascinating structure you've got going on, and I wanted to ask, because you're essentially telling the whole story of these girls' lives while they're in the middle of a fight, I wanted to know, like, how do you balance, for lack of a better term, like the flashback scenes with like the, present time action? How do you just kind of go with like the flow of like what kind of seems more important at the time, or did you try to keep like a conscious balance, make everything feel even, I suppose?
That is such a good question. I don't know if I have like a super straightforward answer. It was kind of, I thought of the physical sections where they're really embodied as places of like clarity or air. It's almost like if someone like swimming in like a curve. So there's sometimes when there's like long digressions. There's like a pretty long digression in the book about the possible meaning of girls' hand clapping games, where you're like, what I would think of as like underwater for a long time, like you're out of an embodied character for a really long time with this monologue and part manifesto about like hand clapping games. There's also a few times when some of the characters like depart physically from the ring through memory or future memories. But even in those sections, yeah, I thought of it as like kind of like holding one's breath and seeing how long maybe the reader could stick with me before I come back up and like re-embody the characters. But I wasn't super regimented about it. But that's such a good question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that compelling read. It was so powerful.
Thank you.
And part of it, or a huge part of it, was your voice is so beautifully resonant. Do you read out loud while you're writing?
Oh, this is such a meaningful question to me. I do. Yeah, I am really deeply influenced by both the work of Diane Williams and the experiences I've had working for her at her literary magazine, Noon. I began working for her in person in 2012. Noon is this incredible literary annual. And the way she runs her magazine and her slush, she's very, very protective of the slush. A lot of literary magazines, when people send things in, it's kind of like the thing for interns or whoever's like lowest on the rung to go through. But with Diane, the slush was like the place of jewels that only she had, would trust herself with. And then when she found a piece that she thought might have some energy, she would bring it to an editorial meeting, and either she would read it out loud, or she would ask one of us, the editors, to read it out loud, and she would correct our readings if we thought we were doing a disservice to the piece, would often stop us and essentially like coach us on how to read a word. And her attention to sound and rhythm is like totally unparalleled and has been like a really deep influence on me and my work. I read, I think, relatively widely. Work that is not interested in sound, I love reading. A lot of dialogue-driven work is not so interested in rhythm and sound, and there's tons of that I like totally adore and love. But for it varies project to project, but it is always something that I'm thinking about, and I do find that writing and editing aloud is useful to me.
I was struck by the way that you described boxing and tennis and like physical, like youth athletic sports as having a dialogue between bodies. And one thing that really struck me was the way that the girls studied each other's eyes in the middle of matches. And I was wondering how you translate a dialogue that is physical and visual into something that is verbal and is able to be grasped by the reader. Like, how do you turn something that is seen through eyes into something that we can read on a page?
Oh, such a good question. I think that I was interested in this notion of staring that can happen in sports because it's such a rare one. There are very, very few activities, I think at one point even one of the characters says this, that allow like the intimacy of staring. There's like acting's one of them, sports is one. Socially, it's still pretty rare. Like, there are some social instances where prolonged like eye contact is appropriate, but they're pretty far and few between. And so I was interested in them as like unique physical and physical occurrences. But I was thinking of like the translation to language as the best tools that I had to get inside all 8 of the main characters. Language is like a deeply insufficient and clunky tool. I feel like it's really classic for writers and poets to bemoan language's limitations. It's a short keyboard for sure. And I think especially for those of you who like work between languages or work as a translator, that inadequacy of language even becomes sometimes even more apparent because you know that there's one language where it's easier to talk about something than in another language. But it's my medium of choice. It's an imperfect tool, but the one that I guess I felt like I could use the best. So I'm not sure it's worked perfectly, but it was my attempt.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
Hi. So you said you watched videos and relied on your own experience, but did you talk to any young women who did this boxing, interview anybody as part of the research for this?
Not for this book, no.
So you just imagine the whole, I mean, it's incredibly vivid, but
I just made that.
Thank you. And with that, can we just give a huge round of applause to Rita?